Okay, so welcome back. We're making our way through this thing, and today we're proceeding along with the Unified Orc War Clan, specifically the Xanthan Orcs. And before we get into that, I just wanted to note that, let's see here. You may have noticed that down here I have removed the expansion factions from our card allotment file. And that's because, oddly enough, as I was getting near the end of this game, I started to feel, things change a little bit as you approach that last few steps before the finish line sometimes. And I found myself feeling a little bit pressed for some of the abilities, some of the captain and formation abilities in particular. And I don't want there to be anything in the game that's born out of that state. I want everything to be inspired. I want everything to feel right, to feel like it's exactly what I want for the game. Almost every card here, when I first create it, the idea of it to me is exactly what I want, and then I go on and I refine it from there. But I want that idea to be present somehow. And so I don't want to kind of concoct or contrive anything that's in the game. I want it all to fit, to have its place, and to be authentically linked to the inspiration behind the game. And so it took me a little time there near the end to kind of back off and come back and find that in those last few steps. And so at that point I was thinking to myself, geez, I had ideas for this thing in terms of an expansion with 6 more factions, which is a tremendous, 6 more faction groups, which is a tremendous amount of content, such that it kind of, requires it to be a standalone in a sense, or at least gives it the ability to be a standalone very easily. It would only require to bring in 10 new locations and maybe some new neutral cards, maybe some new faction cards, but I wouldn't have to, do too much. I mean, the bulk of the game would be done after I made 6 new faction groups. And so I said, God, I don't know, maybe I was, trying to go too far with this. I don't know if I can come up with enough stuff for an expansion. I'm pressed to finish this game. And then, interestingly enough, just as I was wrapping this game up, and I found the inspiration for those last few bits and pieces, boom! It's like another door opened up, and down that door was another hallway with other doors in it, and I started getting flooded with ideas for the Penumbra and for the Ghoul Shade and for the Mages and the other factions that are going to be in the new game. So it was as if that thing started taking over. It kind of the original game kind of got out of the seat of inspiration, and the expansion sat down and it started receiving all the new information and all the new ideas. And so as I started to get those ideas, I didn't want to start mucking up this file, making this twice as long as it had to be. So I went and I brought that out into another file, and you can see I kept it purple to distinguish it as the expansion. And I went and I brought in all my organizational tools from the other one to facilitate creating this game. All right, and so we haven't done much. Most of our things have been done in notes that I keep on my phone. When I get an idea, I'll jot it down, or I have a notebook that I use if I'm going to be sitting somewhere. Like if I go to the DMV or something, I'll bring that notebook and I'll just sit there and I'll work in the notebook. And so it hasn't all been moved into here, but last night I was up until 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't stop working on the primeval orcs, and we actually have 34 of the 50 cards. The initial representation of those cards completed already. So the cards are there with their abilities and things like that. And then of course, as we did with this game, we have a long process of refining that down and everything. Now we're way ahead of ourselves here with this, obviously. I mean, I'm still getting the prototype card, the physical prototype cards constructed for our first playthrough of the original game, which is probably going to blow a lot of the stuff out of the water, change a lot of what we previously thought was going to work. But again, this process for me is a way of kind of recording the inspiration that comes. I mean, if you ever sit in a space of inspiration, you could really get flooded with ideas so fast you could hardly write them down quick enough. Because, if you've ever watched John Cleese's discussion on creativity, you kind of want to take a shotgun approach, especially during the brainstorming stage or at the outset, and just kind of throw everything out there, and then you could sort it out afterwards. But you don't want to lose any little idea, some silly little idea you had for a trinket or the look on a guy's face or a certain kind of helmet. That could all become very important, as we've seen. Some of these little ideas have become artifacts, and those artifacts have contributed to the lore tremendously and have even inspired other games. You see, so we don't want to lose any of that. That's what this is all about. That's why I put in so much work on this thing just sitting here in these files, is so we don't lose any of that as we're mired down in, playtesting mechanisms or, organizing rule books. All right, so this is a way of catching all of that. And so you want that to be a wide net, and you want to get it all down and make sure it's somewhere, even in this notes section, that's where a lot of times I'll just throw stuff, that I'm not sure where it's going to sit yet, or if you just have a name or you have just an idea of a kind of glove a guy's wearing or something, just throw it down somewhere so you don't lose it. Because you cannot trust to memory on these things. It's almost like a dream. You're in kind of a, and that's why so many people are so creative in the wee hours of the morning, because it's almost a dreamlike state where you're receiving a lot of information that you're not really sure where it's coming from. Whether you want to think of it as a subconscious mind or coming from outside yourself somehow in some sense, regardless, it's that feeling of receiving. So, like when you wake up from sleep and you can't really recall the details of a dream, that's what can happen with a lot of your creative ideas if you don't jot them down as soon as possible. So when I'm rolling like I was last night, I just keep rolling because I don't want to lose any of that stuff. That's gold, So that's where we are right now in the process. But we got to get back and we got to plow through everything that has to be done to lay the foundation for that second game. And so let's move along now with our Xanthan Orcs. So we're going to roll down here. Alright, so we're going to see that the Xanth are cunning heavy by a decent margin. Their strikes and evades are both going to be sabotage oriented. Of course, not completely, but that's going to be their focus. Again, being a very cunning faction, sabotage is going to be a big part of what they want to do to the opposition, and it also gives them the ability to that's kind of where their mindset is at in terms of blocking that. You could think of it almost like politicians or something like that, always conniving and scheming and trying to block other people's schemes and stuff like that, and that's kind of what this represents. You can see that they're kind of close, 8 strikes, 12 evades, but a little bit more towards the evades because they're going to work a lot with their tactics and things like that. They're also, the way I thought about this is, again, like politics, you realize that these people who are plotting and scheming are very fearful, insecure people. That's why they're plotting and scheming. They don't trust to faith. They don't believe that there's enough for everyone. They believe in the zero-sum game. It's how a liar always thinks everyone else is lying. If you're always scheming, you're always on guard against other people scheming. And, we've seen a lot of despots, go over the deep end with this idea, with complete paranoia, full blown, And that's the idea I want to present with the Xanthan Orc. That's the level of consciousness that they're coming from. And so they're going to be very on guard, very, very on guard against what other people are trying to do to them. So I wanted to reflect that in the evades. But then again, they're not, as far as combat goes and stuff like that, they're not the strongest faction group. And so we kind of kept it a little bit more balanced. It didn't get way out with maybe, 14 of one and 6 of the other or whatever. But they're definitely leaning more heavy towards trying to protect themselves from the schemes of others. Okay. Now, we looked at the faction leaders, so we're just going to move through those briefly. They don't have too many changes here, I don't believe. Broodfather Ozar, the basic unit costs 2. That's the lowest in the game. And again, we said that's because he's the one who, has fathered, probably a few thousand of these orcs over the course of his very long lifetime. And so, especially the basic units who represent kind of the core population of this faction group, they come to him very readily. All right. When you recruit a basic unit, you may place it into your hand instead of your discard pile. Okay, so again, they come to his call very readily via cost and via his ability. They're ready to go at his call. The assault formation is the crown. And I don't believe he had an assault formation previously, so this is new. If your cunning rank total is higher than your comm rank total, you may acquire 2 basic units from your basic units pile and place them into your comm ranks. Alright, so this is going to help you achieve that balance. Alright, so again, getting basic units. Now there's only 10 of them, so depending on, you know, if you're using his ability a lot to get those basic units, you may not have many left for this formation ability. So you may want to think about that as you're playing the game. And again, trying to use your cunning to kind of strategize and not kind of you know, blow everything at your disposal early in the game. All right, because you would want to save that for that pivotal moment at the end of an assault to grab those 2 basic units and get them into your hand. The fact that you had them in your deck wouldn't be of any use to you at that point. So you'd want to kind of make sure you were keeping an eye on this and keeping, you know, managing that population. Okay, the crown formation secures a route of passage for reinforcements to join the assault. Okay, and so here we have, you know, companies of orcs kind of on the flanks protecting as new units arrive from behind. Okay, and you remember the ridiculously bejeweled and adorned old yellow orc with piercing intelligent eyes and a white beard. Now, we didn't speak about this. We said that the Xanth don't have any body hair because of a daily elixir that they take to stop the growth of body hair, such that they remove themselves, like kind of visually and psychologically, from the lower orders of life, you know, beasts and some of the more brutish orcs. But Broodfather Ozar has the long white beard because it's a representation, it's symbolic of his role in the society. His, you know, as you think of in these high societies, you know, that they kind of try to remove themselves from the base nature of life, the base instincts and the base, you know, activities such as procreation and whatnot. And so this beard is representing his role, that he's a tie back to those inescapable, you know, animalistic roots, you know, and so that's why he wears that beard, and he's the only one who does. Okay, and then we have his daughters, 2 of them anyway, the sister twins of Xanthus. They rule the Xanthan culture at this time. Basic unit cost is 3. Still, again, you know, average. They come pretty readily because this is the leader of the faction group. Whenever an effect causes you to discard or destroy a basic unit, you may draw a card. Okay, so you know, again, if an effect causes you to discard or destroy a basic unit, you're going to draw another card to come in its place. Okay, it's this idea of, you know, one guy falls, they bring another one in, they have like unlimited units at their disposal, being the leader of the faction group. And again, this basic unit costs 3. They're not coming out of love or out of like respect the way they are for Broodfather Ozar. They're coming out of, you know, domination and authority. So it's a little bit less compelling in that way. I mean, it's compelling for sure, but obviously, if someone is self-motivated, that's a little bit easier to get them on board. So that's why there's that difference there. The assault formation, Hand of Malice. If the opponent has more total units in their combined ranks than you do, they must discard units until both factions have an equal number of units. The Hand of Malice formation divides the enemy ranks, diminishing their ability to overwhelm with larger numbers. Okay, so we said that, you know, the Xanths aren't necessarily the strongest faction group in terms of, you know, their fighting ability. It's more their tactics and strategy that allow them to be successful. And so they're going to use this to, you know, reduce down the enemy ranks to a more manageable number. Okay? And you can see it spread out like the fingers of a hand. It kind of infiltrates, penetrates their ranks, and kind of culls them. Okay. Alright, and so the Golden Coffer, this is one that we've looked at before. 3 and 3, it's an equipment item that you play from your hand. There's 3 of them. You may destroy this card from your hand to recruit 1 unit from your faction's row of the active field or basic units pile without paying its cost. So when we are recruiting without paying cost, we have deemed that acquire. Alright, contrary to what we had spoken about at one point with the word acquire, we have decided to use it in this context. To acquire a card is just to get the card. You don't have to pay anything. Alright, so you may destroy this card from your hand to acquire 1 unit from your faction's already active field or your basic units pile. You just get it. Alright, but now this is going to be limited because you destroy this card. So you can only do this 3 times in a game if this came up 3 times. If the opponent didn't take any of them away from you by paying its defense cost on their turn. The max times this can happen is 3. Alright, so it's not too dangerous that you're getting these units for free, because they could be of any cost. I mean, you could be grabbing a 7 cost unit for free. Come now, surely we can arrange something. Sternus the Adorned, who we'll take a look at him as we go forward, but if you remember him, you'll know why that quote makes sense. Okay, and the golden box being opened slightly with multicolored coins inside, the hands of Sternus holding the coffer. Alright, now the Gilded Carapace. Okay, so we, it's an equipment attachment, an armor attachment. There's 2 of them. Cost is 4. The attached unit gains +2 comm. So, again, kind of incorporating that idea of defense into combat ability. Your ability to stay on the field without being removed via injury is something that we spoke about in the previous videos when we were talking about the Soberhold Bulwark. So this is going to be a way to take these weaker units and make them a little bit stronger in combat. The Gilded Carapace, let's take a look at what it looks like. The rounded surface of the Gilded Carapace allows it to deflect blows and maneuver easily in crowded melee environments. Let's say the wearer to deflect blows and maneuver easily, because a carapace doesn't maneuver, so we want to bring in the wearer there. Alright, so I picture this as kind of a large rounded 2-part shell, adorned in ornate golden design worn over either side of the unit. Okay, so you might have seen this kind of thing, I don't know, maybe in Gundams or something like that, you know, just like this, it's like this rounded armor that's coming down over both arms, and you can kind of tuck in and it would kind of close up and you'd be inside of that shell. Alright, and so it has the evade ability, destruction, return this card to your hand. So you're going to be able to evade destruction and stay on the field. So this is going to come back to your hand, it's not going to be destroyed, nor is the unit that's being targeted or whatever card's being targeted by the destruction. Alright, the War Crest of Adula, we spoke about at length because it inspired so much lore and actually brought us back to the Monolith era and inspired the game Recitals of Redimere, the Monolith Accord. Alright, which is the 3rd and probably last game in this Recitals of Redimere series. And so 8, so right in the middle, they're usually between 7 and 9. So 8 cost on the War Crest. And again, notorious as it's an artifact. The attached unit increases their comm by their cunning value, so allowing them to use cunning toward a combat goal. Because the legendary warrior of Xanth folklore, Adula, is said to have harnessed the power of the subconscious mind to deliver perfectly precise strikes to her enemies. Alright, so that mental aspect, that which being reflected by cunning, being translated into combat. Okay, so a magical circlet with a crest on the front. Okay, and I have to think about what the symbology on that crest is going to be. Alright, now we have the Magic Dagger, which is a weapon attachment. There's 4 of these, so quite a few of them. They're very cheap, cost 2. The attached unit gains +1 comm, and may have another equipment attached. And you'll see that's because if another Magic Dagger is attached to this unit, this weapon grants an additional +1 combat. Alright, so this is a small weapon that you'll hold in one hand, and then if you have 2 of them, you're that much more effective. So it has a potential to give 2 to a relatively weak unit. Okay, so that's why we put 4 of them in there, trying to give you the opportunity to at least gain a couple of these over the course of the game so you can have this ability trigger. The malevolent magic of this dagger is compounded by multiple applications. So you can almost think of it as like a magical poison. And it's a dagger with a glowing blade. Okay, pretty simple. Okay, the debilitating thought seed, we looked at this as one of the tactics. There's 4 of these, so this is their primary tactic. We have this spread of 2 on the tactics for the Xanthan Orcs because they're very tactic focused and they have very strong tactics. So instead of 1, we have a spread of 2 here. This is going to give you 1 cunning right off the bat when you play it, or you could discard it for its strike ability, attrition. Destroy this card, then choose an opponent to acquire an attrition and place it on top of their deck. Alright, so they're not just going to have that go into the discard pile and shuffled into their deck. They are going to actually have it placed on top, which means they're going to get it on the very next turn. Okay. Within the recesses of every mind are thoughts of fear and insecurity. Bring them to the fore, and your enemies will defeat themselves. That's Dirksen, the Minister of Sorcery. Okay, so the debilitating thought seed is going to put attrition into the enemy deck. Okay, Dirksen, with Melia raised finger, causes 3 elves to drop their weapons and grab their heads with mind-racking anguish. Alright, because it's a debilitating thought seed. Okay. Alright, now we're going to look at Ransom. 3 of these, 5 and 7, cost of defense. Again, you're going to get +1 cunning for this. In addition, you're going to get this ability. Choose a unit in your opponent's row of the active field. Each opponent discards 2 cards, or the chosen unit is destroyed, and you gain influence equal to its VP value. So obviously, the higher the value of the unit, the better the ransom is going to work, you see. Because you're going to gain more influence for destroying it. In addition, the opponent is going to be more inspired to try and, you know, recover that unit, or at least protect that unit in this case. And now this ransom is not destroyed when you use it, so you're going to be able to do this over and over again, okay? And so there being 3 in the deck, you know, you're not going to have a ton of these, but when you do get one, you're going to be able to use it over and over. Okay. Despite what you may have heard, I can be quite reasonable. That's Xanthan of High Province, who we'll see as we go into the captains for this faction. Xanthan standing coolly and expectantly behind a bent, unknown figure, covered with a cloth, with 2 agents of edicts holding weapons to them. The agents of edicts are kind of like security forces, like police almost of the Xanthan culture, all right, and we'll see them. And so they have somebody covered in a cloth that they're you know, that they've kidnapped and that they're ransoming. Okay. Okay. So the Seeds of Descent, 4 and 6. That spread of 2. This time it's cunning 3. All right. So this is a very strong tactic. It has the strike ability, so you're gonna have to choose. You want this 3 or you want this strike. Sabotage. Choose an opponent to discard a card from their reserves pile. Okay. So getting into the reserves, that's something that we haven't seen, I don't believe, to this point. And so someone that you've put aside with the specific intent of using it, so you've given this some thought, you've chosen them specifically and put them into your reserves, and now the Seeds of Descent is going to remove them. They're going to become, you know, unwilling to obey the orders you had in mind for them. Really, how hard is it to point out their folly? Xerxes, the Minister of Scorn, who thinks everyone's an idiot, right? So how hard is it to point that out when it's so blatantly obvious? Okay, so he points this out to someone in the reserves pile. They see the error of their ways, and according to his argument anyway, and you know, ceases to follow along with what they were supposed to do. So there's the descent. 2 guardians of the front line standing guard, one looking forward and the other looking sideways suspiciously with head straight ahead. In other words, you have the 2 guards facing you as you look at this image. They're just supposed to be standing guard, you know. And, you know, one of them is just standing guard. The other one looks like he's facing the same direction, but he's actually looking sidelong at the guy next to him. All right, suspicious. You know, he's suspicious of the guy next to him. He's not, you know, on board 100%. He's got questions. He's got ideas. And so that's just in that subtle, you know, glance to the side, hoping we'll be able to reflect that in the artwork. We'll see. Okay. All right, so now we're into the units, the basic units, the Xanthan Conscript. So again, this is a unit who's been drafted, who's been forced to participate in this. 2 combat, 1 cunning. Pretty fair for a basic unit. 3 defense. Okay, so not all that strong. This is just a generic everyday grunt, so to speak. But it does have the synergy ability for basic units. Alright, so for each other basic unit played this phase, this unit gains the bonus of +1 combat. So we spoke about the Xants being stronger in numbers, stronger through organization. And so this is being reflected in this basic conscript, and there's 4 of these. So this is the most prolific basic unit. It also has the assault ability. Destroy this unit to destroy any unit in your opponent's cunning ranks. Alright? So it may not be able to go head-to-head with those who are in your combat ranks, but it is going to be able to target those in your cunning ranks, and it's going to just outright destroy that unit. It'll be destroyed in the process. These are expendable units. Okay? Just get us more. There's only so many of them they can slaughter. the sister twins of Xanthus. Okay, so you can see the attitude towards these conscripts. All right, so you see the picture that we're trying to paint of the Xanthan Orcs. A certain type of society, one that should sound pretty familiar, and so, you know, they're expendable. All right, and just throw as many as you have to at them. Doesn't matter if they get killed. Just get us more. We want to win. That's all that matters to us. Okay, they're just pawns. Young male in light armor with a short spear or sword and a narrow crossbow on hip. So just general standard issue equipment for the conscripts. Okay, and the young male. All right, so again, there's something being said there in terms of their ability to discern the fact that they're being taken advantage of. All right, it's not that good. All right, because they're young, they're also male, which makes them expendable in this society, the female-dominated culture of the Xanth. And again, there is a big discrepancy here. I mean, it's female-dominated, not just in terms of the power structure, but in terms of the psychology. The men are second-class citizens by all accounts. The men included would feel that way. You know, they've been conditioned this way, aside from maybe some rare instances of those who have, you know, are enlightened to the fact that this is all a bunch of nonsense. But, you know, again, thinking about American slavery and the unfortunate circumstance of the mind control that was in place, how the slaves felt like they should be slaves. Of course, not all of them, but to a large degree in the slave culture, they accepted their role. You know, and you know, this is evident in a lot of the materials that you read on the subject. Of how they could almost not even think outside of the construct that had been presented to them. I mean, this is really the true shame of it, is the humanity degrading influence of this mind control of saying you're second class and this is where you belong in this station in life, and making you believe that is the true crime. You see, that's the true disgrace, is in getting someone to believe that. And it's a disgrace on both sides of it, really. I mean, obviously the person doing this is a misanthropic person, but the person who's believing it is denying their, however you want to think of it, their innate divinity, their innate equality. They've lost track of that, and you know, in most cases they could hardly be blamed, because it's very hard to overcome the cultural paradigm unless you just happen to be born one of these people who is so inclined, who's just inclined towards wisdom, insight, you know, and that kind of thing. I mean, the culture is telling you the opposite constantly, everywhere you look, including amongst the other people who you live with, who are in your situation. And so it's very difficult to overcome that. And so that's all kind of implicit here in this culture, where the men are considered second class, are treated as such, and are made to believe that that's where they belong. All right. And also we mentioned that the ministers are all male. And you say, well, why do they hold high positions of rank and power in this society? They don't hold true power. They're puppets. All right. Like many politicians, or like all politicians, I mean, on a high level anyway, they're puppets of people behind the scenes. All right. Who basically control them. All right. And so, you know, these people are being used because the males in this case are being used so they present a familiar face to those who are trying to dominate. If we're trying to dominate men, then we want to put men in front of them, so it sounds like the ideas are coming from one of their own. All right, but really they're just echoing the ideas of the sister twins and those other higher ranking people. Maybe someone like Xanthan of High Province, who's just like, maybe like comes from a wealthy family of, strong ancestry, so to speak. You know, these types of people in the society are the controllers. And so we want our voice to the controlled to be one of their own, because it holds a lot more weight with them. It makes it harder to get into that, to get to that point of realization that you're being dominated by the other gender in this case. Okay, so enough about that. Let's move on. All right, so the Xanthan officer. Okay, the Xanthan officers are prized for their ability to elicit full compliance from the conscripts, no matter how hazardous the command. So this is a perfect example. All right, so we unintentionally segued into this perfectly. Here you have the Xanthan officer, who's going to be a male unit, whose job is to get full compliance from the conscripts. All right, so we're going to put a male in that position who they can relate to, and who they're going to believe, and who they're going to respect, as one of their own. I figure, hey, if he's okay with all of this, then, I should be too. And he's presenting a very confident, air about him. And so they're prized for their ability to do that, to make this all sound like it makes sense. Hey, go out there and kill yourself. We're going to throw you all guys, towards Hamburger Hill here, and I'm going to convince you that it's a good idea as one of your own. This isn't coming from outside the group, so to speak. All right, so more cunning than combat in that regard, but the Xanthan officer is on the field, so he's going to have a little combat, but a pretty low defense. He's going to, of course, again, in using slavery terms, he's like the driver. He's one of the slaves who are, whipping the other slaves into doing what they're supposed to do. So he's going to use them to protect himself as well as the higher-ups. That's the benefit he's going to have for taking on this despicable role. Okay, think of it even as like the house slave, who might, almost side with the master in a lot of cases because of the benefits they gain from doing so. All right, and so choose another unit to gain +1 combat. All right, so he's going to be able to grant additional combat ability to another unit. All right, so you add that +1 up with the synergy, and you can get these conscripts up a little bit. Instead of just being this 2-com unit, now it's a 4-com unit, let's say, or maybe even more, depending on how many other basic units were played. All right. In fact, since this is a basic unit, this guy's going to not only gain this +1 com, but he's going to gain the +1 com for the synergy when the Xanthan officer is present. So he's going up to 4 right off the bat if the Xanthan officer targets him. All right. And he also has the assault ability. All right, so again, we have assault abilities in the basic units, reflecting that this is how they win battles and this is how they win assaults, is by grouping together and organizing with the masses of their units, not with like some kind of champion who comes out. If this is the last unit in either of your ranks at the end of this assault, all units in this unit's rank get +1 com and +1 cunning. Now, even though they're only going to be able to apply one of these, we give them both because we don't know which rank you're going to put this in. So they get both, and then whichever one is applicable is the one that you'll get to use. And so, again, this is how these assault abilities have to be structured to work within the mechanism of assault that we have, whereby abilities happen the second you put the card down. All right. In order to grant something to one of the previous units, we don't want to use attachments and things like that. It gets clunky and unmanageable in that environment where we're stacking the cards on top of each other. Not stacking, but layering the cards on top of each other. But so we're going to have these kind of abilities be applicable if this is the last unit, because that last unit is still going to be face up. You're going to be able to see the whole card at the end of the assault. So those abilities will allow to kind of persist and have an effect as we move towards totaling up our assault power for the assault. Okay? Alright. Grotesquely bossy looking thin male pointing with conscripts charging from behind. Alright, so this idea of pointing out and they're all rushing from either side of him to go forward in the direction of his finger, right, where he's pointing. Grotesquely bossy looking. Just kind of like a contrived, bossy look. I mean, he has no real authority, you know what I mean, over anybody else, obviously. I mean, who does have real authority? I mean, it's just a concept that you must accept. And so, it's all nonsense, this guy having any, the fact that they're listening to him is a foolish choice that they're making, but so he has this air of superiority, kind of like if you have like a, some low-level manager type who as soon as he gets a little power, he's swaggering around and bossing everybody around like he's somebody important. And that's kind of the idea I wanted to get across with the Xanthan officer. He's nothing, this guy, but, he's going to walk around like he is somebody, right? So that's the Xanthan officer. All right, and now the Xanth chaplain, because we kind of wanted to bring in this idea of religion into this, because again, this is another aspect of this kind of society, where if we can't get you with our dictates and our laws and that left brain modality, then we'll get you with the more subtle, a mutation of true spirituality via dogmatic religion. All right, get you on the right brain modality. You see, so whatever kind of person you are naturally, which way you sway, we got you covered on both ends, and you're completely dominated. All right, and so that's where the Xanth chaplain comes in. He's going to be all cunning, only one defense. All right, this is just like typical like robed old orc or something like that. And so you may discard this card to draw a card. Okay, so if you want to get another card, you can. All right, he has the ability to kind of facilitate somebody else coming into the fold, or maybe getting a piece of equipment or something like that. I mean, this is what a chaplain is. He's in this notion of religion, in this kind of dogmatic, false, dominator religion, that's what they are. They're a facilitator for the power. So, he's going to be more of the guy who can like get something done, maneuver around. He's not somebody who's going to go out there and fight. All right, and he has the evade ability, attrition. Return this card to your hand. So he's going to be able to stem that attrition because he's going to bolster the forces against your efforts to make them give up the fight. Okay, and a lot of times, with attrition, the way we're using the idea is relating mostly to units, their loyalty and their willingness to fight. That's how I wanted to use this. It's not a wearing down of, equipment and stuff like that, or weakening the opponent in that way. We're focusing more on the units and how it does apply. I mean, you still, with an attrition card, you can discard. It makes you discard a card, and it could be an equipment, so it does have that effect. I mean, but the thematic focus is going to be on the psychology and the units. It also has the sabotage ability, draw a card. So if you try to sabotage, if they try to sabotage and you evade it, you're going to have to discard this card. You're not going to get it back into your hand, but then you're going to draw a card to replace it. If it's attrition, you're just going to keep this card in your hand. All right? You are chosen. What have you to fear? Right? If you're chosen by the gods for this purpose to go out onto the battlefield, then what have you to fear? Because we don't want you to fear. We want you to throw yourself into danger recklessly, right? So this notion that you've been chosen for this task is one way of doing that. All right, and so that's how the Xant Chaplain is going to go about getting people on board. All right, he's a glorified voodoo orc wearing finery. All right, so he's a flim-flammer, but he's wearing this finery to make him seem like he's more important than he is. Okay. All right, now the agent of edicts, which we described almost like a law enforcement type. All right, pretty strong, 6 cunning and 6 defense. They're going to be even in this faction. Well, actually, a lot of times they're going to be under, which we're going to see in a lot of these types, but they're very rarely going to be over in terms of their defense being higher than their cost. All right, so this is a very strong unit, and they are even. All right, because again, we're starting with the base idea that the defense might be lower than their cost. So a strong unit is going to be even, but it's still not going to exceed it. All right, and the combat is 3, which is very strong so far. We haven't seen that, and also 1 cunning. There's 5 of these, so they're prolific. Obviously able to fortify. They're going to have synergy with other agents. All right, so the other agent of edicts. Destroy a card in your discard pile. So for each other agent of edicts you played this turn, you're going to gain this bonus where you could destroy a card in your discard pile. All right, so and that's if you play the card for its combat or cunning. But if you want to evade, it has the sabotage effect. Place the strike card just evaded into the active field. All right, so it's going to stop the strike, and then it's also going to remove the strike from your opponent. It's going to go back into the active field. They're going to have to purchase it again. All right, so their ability to kind of, crime fighting kind of thing. You're trying to do something against them. They're going to, put a stop to it. All right. And the agent of edicts enforces the dictates of the sister twins with steadfast resolve, lest they become the target of their own brothers in arms. Okay, so if somebody tries to step out and not do what the sister twins want them to do, whether it's good or bad, if they don't just follow orders, then they're going to become the target of the others. All right, which so often happens in this kind of a situation, in this kind of a society, where it's hard to get a foothold to kind of rebel against this thing because the other slaves, so to speak, are working against you as well, not just the power that you're up against. All right, so they're in a state of complete domination. Okay. And now the purveyor of promulgation. All right, so this is like a propaganda minister. 5 cunning, only 2 defense, very weak. It's a speaker, so +3 cunning. Reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a unit, place it into your hand. Otherwise, you may discard or destroy it. All right, so another way of culling, getting rid of cards you don't want, making your deck more effective. This is a big part of what the Xant do. Again, that organization, that control, and that ability to get the most out of weaker cards. Okay, but if it's a unit, you're going to place it into your hand because the propaganda minister is going to be able to convince people to join the fight. Okay, And 4 of these, so quite a few of those. Again, getting the most out of these weaker units. You have these weaker units, we're going to get to use them more often, we're going to get to bump them up, they're going to get bonuses for being together. We're going to really try and do everything we can to get the most out of these weaker units. Okay. The purveyors of promulgation shape Xanthan culture by disseminating advantageous information at every opportunity. Advantageous to who? The sister twins. The controlling power. Okay. And they shape Xanthan culture. So a lot of this mind control that we've been talking about and this cultural paradigm is going to be put into place by these guys. All right. I don't know what we're thinking. Talkative, certain female minister. There aren't going to be any female ministers, but it's not a minister per se. So we might just say it's a female. I do want to make sure that, we're using men a lot. We're using the males a lot for the fighting. We're using them as the ministers for the aforementioned reason. So since this is a female-dominated culture, we do want to have a lot of female, cards. We don't want them all to be male, even though they are using males, to their advantage often. And especially in a war environment, there would be a lot of males for that reason. We do want to reflect the fact, we want to reflect that female presence. So I think it's better to just keep this female. Plus, this is a person who gets it. This is a person who's on the inside. This is a person who's purposefully warping information and choosing what's going to be disseminated. And so this is somebody who's kind of on the, the inside track. So we want that to be female. Okay. And then sternness the adorned, we talked about. Cunning 4, very high cunning. If you remember, the Xanthan Minister of Coffers has a notorious propensity for accepting gifts during periods of difficult negotiation, and all negotiations with the minister are difficult. Okay, so again, this is a shady negotiator who's going to take bribes. All right, he's notorious. You may place an equipment card from your faction's already active field into your hand. If you do, choose an opponent to draw a card. We spoke about this before. It's a back scratching mechanism here. All right. In addition, it has the strike, sabotage, acquire 1 influence from an opponent. All right. So this is going to take influence directly from an opponent. All right, which has a doubling effect. You gain 1 and they lose 1. Okay. Ostentatious, bitter-faced old male orc in dark robes. And then we have the Warden of Commissions. 3 of these. 5 with 3 defense. Again, a little bit higher cunning than combat. We're seeing that on a lot of these units because it's a cunning-focused faction group. Discard cards from your deck until you discard a unit or your deck is depleted. Place any units discarded this way into your hand. Okay. Alright, we're saying any units. It could only be 1 unit because you're discarding cards from your deck until you discard a unit, then you're stopping. So really, like, place a unit. Place a unit. Place the unit. So you can say place the unit discarded this way because there may not be a unit discarded this way. That's why we use the word any. Alright, so I guess it would be any unit instead of any units because there can't be units discarded this way. Once you get to a unit, you're going to stop. So place any unit discarded this way. So any is kind of reflecting that uncertainty of whether there will be a unit or not. But we do want to keep it in the singular because there can't be more than 1. So place any unit discarded this way into your hand. I think that's better. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to go until the deck is depleted and then you're going to stop. We're not going to like reshuffle until you get a unit or anything like that. He's trying to hire somebody for the job, so to speak, or call someone to the job. And so he may fail. But even if he fails, you're getting +2 combat and +1 cunning here. Okay, so it's not the end of the world if this didn't work out. But he's going to try. Alright, and then also the assault ability, because he can fortify as well. You may discard this card to place a unit from your discard pile into your hand. Okay, I mean, plain and simple, he's going to get another unit to do this job. Alright, I've got a job for you, the Warden of Commissions. Okay, so he comes and gets you, decides who it's going to be, and brings him out for the fight. Okay, stern, cold male orc, eyes shadowed under domed helmet, broad in size, dark yellow skin, holding a slim tablet. Alright, the tablet, I'm not thinking of like an iPad, I'm thinking of like maybe, I don't know, not necessarily like a stone tablet, but just a, like a clipboard kind of a thing, where, he's obviously got people's information and stuff written there, and he's deciding who's going where, and he's checking off things, and he's, making decisions. This is the kind of guy we're talking about. He's not really out there with a sword, so much. But he is out there, so I mean, he does have a little bit of combat ability, but you see very low defense. Okay, he's an organizational unit. All right, and there's 3 of those, so that's going to allow you again to go get these units that you want. All right, so the efficacy of units is increased by your ability to choose which ones you have at any given time. You see what I mean? Even though you might have some weaker units, your ability to choose, let's say a +2 combat, +1 cunning unit when you're trying to make a capture, being able to choose that over a +1 combat, +2 cunning unit would be an advantage. It would strengthen the faction group. Alright, so again, that idea of getting the most out of weaker units by being able to choose which ones you have at any given time. And then the Xanthan High Guard. There's only 2 of these. These are females. The fearless and revered Xanthan High Guards are the only female warriors amongst the Xanth, and the only ones worthy to personally guard the sister twins. So they would not have male guards, because males, again, are unworthy for the most important jobs. Alright, so there are certain females, you know, maybe these types who they're not exactly on the inside track. I mean, because again, if they're standing as defenders, that means they're putting themselves in harm's way for somebody else. So there's a certain amount of manipulation that goes into getting someone to accept that position, to kind of deny their own self-preservation to preserve another who, you know, they don't necessarily, you know, feel is better than them or something like that. They have to be convinced of that via this idea of authority. Alright, so they're not on the inside track per se, but it's too important a job to leave to a male. So you find these females who maybe are a little bit strong, maybe not so intelligent that they get what's going on 100%, and you can convince them to take this job. But they're going to be highly trained, because we're not allow a female warrior to be anything but the best warrior. You know, any female who's present in any situation must be the best of all the people who are there. You see what I'm saying? So the Xanthan High Guards at the top, and they're revered for this on purpose. Again, this would be something that the the purveyor of promulgation would make sure that we're honoring them, and we're always patting them on the back, and we're always telling them how great they are for doing this, and raising them up, you know, in the eyes of the society as well as in their own minds. Okay, so that helps them be more fearless. You know, they think they're doing something important. Okay, so 8 cunning. Okay, so that's a high cost for these high guards. And a 9 defense, which is very rare amongst the Xanth. I don't believe we've seen it previously where their defense is higher than their cost. They're highly trained, very, very effective. They can fortify. You may attach this card to one of your faction's captains in the battlefield. When an opponent would capture that captain, destroy this card instead. Which means they're going to have to pay the captain's cost, to the captain's defense, to get rid of this card, not their defense. Even though their defense is high enough, captains presumably are going to be 10 and above. So they're going to have to pay that. It could be 13 or who knows what. You're going to have to pay that to get rid of the High Guard. So the High Guard is going to be defending the most important people in the society. Okay, that's the idea here. And they have this nice ability, which is very rare, the ability to protect captains directly. And they have the evade ability as well during the game until you get to the point where you want to use this. Because obviously once you use this, they're going to attach to the captain until the captain is captured. When the captain is captured, you're going to destroy this card, because if a captain is captured, they've obviously been defeated first. Alright, because you know, when an opponent would go to capture them, they're going to be destroyed. So you're going to lose the unit. So once you do this, that's it. You've lost them from your hand, from your deck. Alright, so in the meantime, you can use this evade ability, sabotage. The opponent discards a card from their hand. So when you try to sabotage and you fail because of this evade, you're going to lose a card in addition to the strike that you just lost. And it's a female elite guard with spear length mace. Alright, so a very long mace and a slender shield. The illusion of hair created by long cloth headpiece hanging from the rear of the helmet. The face is showing, though the helmet is low on the brow. Okay. Alright, that's the look. And now we're into the captains. Okay, so Bezel, Idol of Edicts. Alright, so remember the Agent of Edicts? This is the Idol of Edicts. Alright, the foremost enforcement officer of the Xanthus. Bezel stands as the embodied will of the sister twins. Alright, that's why we're calling him the Idol of Edicts. He's the focus. He's the top cop. And he's the, he's the one who is going to stand as that male representative of the sister twins' will. Alright. Stern, strong orc male with an ornate strap over the top of his head that comes to an octagon-shaped emblem on the forehead on one side, and comes around either side of the head and clasps under the jaw on the other. So the idea is like just his face is showing through this headpiece. And it's going to have a strap over the top with an octagon on the forehead, which is extremely symbolic. I'm not going to get into it here, but for those of you who understand the significance of the octagon, particularly placed on the forehead, it's a symbol of domination via the power structure that's here. Okay, so having an octagon on the head, all right, is especially on the forehead in this way is very strong symbology for the fact that he's owned by the sister twins and he's dominated. All right, and so he's going to be the main one who's going to get the agents to fall in line, and also you know, he's going to be very forceful himself in enacting the will of the sister twins. All right, so strong defense 13, arrival, capture all opposing units in the active field. If no units were captured, destroy all non-artifact equipment in the opposing faction's row of the active field. All right, I don't know if there's a better way to word that. It's just a little long, but he's going to capture all the opposing units, so he's making arrests, right? He's coming in, and he's getting everybody in the active field, all right, because he's strong, presumably he has other guys with him. All right, he's going to round up everybody in the active field, okay? If no units were captured, though, if this comes at a time when there's only equipment and tactics out there or something like that, then you're going to destroy all non-artifact equipment. So he's going to come in and smash everything up. It's like cops making a raid. He's going to come in and smash everything up. And so he's going to get either the units or he's going to get everything else. All right, but he's getting a lot of something. Okay, and now the idea here is that we don't want him to be able to destroy an artifact in this way, particularly because that's not to your benefit if you're playing the Xanth. You want that artifact to be captured, so we don't want him destroying it. And then as far as this capture all opposing units, you know, typically in this scenario I'd say all non-notorious, because we don't want him to be able to get those very you know, important units, and also those are units that you would typically like to capture, not destroy. But here he is capturing them, so I guess it's not that big a deal. I mean, you're getting it. I mean, you're getting it for free, which is wonderful, because typically that would be an expensive unit. So since he's not destroying units, I didn't put non-notorious in here, because you are getting what you want. You're getting to capture that unit. And hey, I guess let it be, you know, just when he arrives. If he arrives and there happens to be a great unit out there, then you really scored. I think that that's okay. I don't have a problem with that right now. We'll see when we play it if it doesn't feel right. But, you know, again, notorious units are just units. I mean, they're good units, but there are other good units that are up at 7 cost with 2 VP. Not only the notorious ones. So, you know, losing that isn't like game breaking where it's like, well, now I can't win because I lost my notorious unit. I mean, there's only one of them typically. I mean, unless it also, you know, maybe the neutral unit. But, you know, it's not all that important that if you lost it, it would be, you know, detrimental to your ability to win, you know, like irrevocably. All right, and then each turn, you may place a Xanthan Orc unit from your discard pile on top of your deck. Okay, so again, as this top cop, he's able to command others to come and do what he wants them to do. So any Xanthan Orc unit, you know, obviously you might have a lot of Agent of Edicts in there because there's a lot of them, so he'd be able to call them out, and they're pretty strong. And then for 1 influence, you can activate this ability. Search your deck and discard pile for Agent of Edicts cards, reveal them and place them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So any that aren't in your hand are going to come into your hand, which means all Agent of Edicts cards that you own are going to be available to you via this ability. And again, the strongest abilities are these activate abilities typically. And so you'd want to build up a lot of these Agents of Edicts so that way Bezel can command them, because obviously he commands them best, so he's able to get all of them on board at a simple call. All right. Okay, and we looked at him. All right, and VP 6 for that 13. We said 13 or 14 defense is going to get you that VP 6. All right, and we looked at Xerxes previously and spoke about him quite a bit. This captain cannot be captured unless it is the only captain on your faction side of the battlefield. All right, so he's going to be protected by other units. Because, again, we're putting him out on the battlefield. You see defense 9. So that's very, very low. I mean, here he's actually going below what we would have for a captain. Typically it would be 10 or above. All right, so now we have regular units who are 9. All right, so you see he's very low. He's going to need some protection out there. He's not a fighter. So he's going to be protected by any other captains who are out there. But if there are none out there, then you're going to be able to get him. Each turn, you may discard a card from your hand to draw 2 cards. Alright, so maybe get rid of an elemental or a weaker card to get 2 more. Alright, and again, this idea of discarding, you know, scorn, it's like getting rid of something to the benefit of the society. That's his role, as we discussed. So that's why we have discard and then gain a benefit as a result of that. And then activate. You may choose any number of units in the active field to place on the bottom of their faction deck. So that could be yours or the opponent's. Because again, the Minister of Scorn, he can even affect the units of the Xanth. If you don't like who's out there, you can, you know, you're no good, get out of here. We're going to put you on the bottom of the faction deck. You're going to be, you know, ostracized, so to speak. But he can also do this to the opponent. Alright, so that's, as we discussed, going to the bottom of the faction deck is basically going to Siberia. You're probably not going to see the light of day again. We'll see how the number of cards, we have about, I think, 70 cards in the faction deck. We'll see how that plays out as we play the game, whether we often get to the bottom of the faction deck. All the captains are going to come out, as well as all the locations are going to come out in the top 40 cards. So those remaining 30 are just going to be as you're playing the game to try and get all the other captains and the commander to end the game. So 30 turns, you know, should be enough to do that. Presumably you're not going to ever get to the bottom of the faction deck, but we'll see. Okay, and the convicts of the High Court of Xanthus anticipate their sentence and subsequent censure by Minister Xerxes with equal dread. Okay, so we talked a lot about him already. Condescending, nose-raised orc male in lavish robes, flanked by 2 high guards. Alright, so those 2 high guards are going to be what gives him this defense at all. I mean, otherwise he'd be at, like, defense 1. He's like a, you know, he's an old, scrawny, you know, guy who couldn't do anything for himself. You could push him over, you know, with 1 finger. But the high guards are going to even get him up to 9, which isn't even that high, but that's how he got even that far. Alright, and then we have Chief Tactician Hyzol. Alright. Austere, weathered, tall orc male with strong features and frond adornments on his brainy head holding a map. Okay, so he's a very intelligent tactician. Alright. Ideally, Morik, the path to victory will be greased with the blood of our enemies, not our own. Alright, and he's talking to Morik the Gasher, who's a captain of the Blood Orc faction who, you know, is kind of a bully amongst his own people. Alright, so he's saying here, as the chief tactician, he's explaining to him how it's not smart to be fighting amongst ourselves here. You know, we want to make sure that we're focusing our efforts on the enemy. Okay, so this will reflect to Morik's personality as well. So again, kind of linking that lore together. Alright, the arrival effect. Each player of this captain's faction may discard any number of cards to draw an equal number of cards. Okay. Tactician, so he's helping you refine your hand a little bit. If you don't like some of the cards, you can get rid of them and presumably bring in something better. Each turn you may draw a card, so just getting you more options. Okay, as the tactician. And then activate for 1 influence, add the top 3 cards of your faction deck to the active field. More options. Okay, so your active field to go from 4 to 7, presumably. There may already be 5 or 6 out there for some other reason, but he's going to add 3. I mean, that's so 3 out of a, you know, a row that would typically hold 4 cards is a lot. All right, so he's almost doubling your choices. All right, enabling you to become more tactical. Okay. And now Xanthan of High Province, who we saw earlier. Alright, so this is a youngish female orc with bejeweled headbands flanked by a Xanthan officer and chaplain. This is kind of just, like I said, like a young woman from a wealthy family of long and powerful lineage. Okay, so she has a lot of influence, but not for any other reason than that. You know, it's not because of her job in the society, it's just because of who she is. But again, being in that role, she's a plotter and a schemer and a controller. The arrival effect. Each player of this captain's faction may acquire a basic unit and place it into the hand. Alright, so using that influence to help both players in a team game acquire a basic unit for free and also place it right into their hand. Each turn, if there are less than 3 units attached to this card, you may attach a basic unit from your hand. I guess to this card, as obvious as that may be. We want to make sure that we say it. So if there are less than 3 units attached to this card, you may attach a basic unit from your hand to this card. So here she allows you to get a basic unit, put it into your hand, and then on the turn, you're going to be able to attach that basic unit to her. Alright, this captain cannot be captured while units are attached to it. When an attached unit would be captured, destroy it instead. All right, so when you attach units to her, you're going to be protecting her, but those units are going to be targetable. All right, so you can capture those units. Of course, you're not going to actually get to capture them because when they would be captured, they're going to be destroyed. But you're going to be able to target them. So you're going to have to bring down her bodyguards before you can get to her, is the idea here. Okay, now, this may have caused a little bit of a problem. Let's go in here. Attachments generally refers us back to equipment, I believe. Attachments. Yeah, this isn't going to give us the information we want. We got to go to equipment to see more about attachments. Attachments that are attached to another card cannot be purchased and share the fate of the attached unit, being discarded or destroyed along with the unit. So here we say that they can't be purchased, which means they can't be captured. So this isn't going to work. We have a discrepancy between the rules and the card. They're not targetable when they're attached. So we're going to have to work that out. I think I'd like to change the rule rather than change the card, because the rules I want to be inclusive. In other words, I want all the ideas I have for the cards to be permitted by the rules unless there's a reason why it would break the game. And making attachments targetable in this sense wouldn't break the game. I'm trying to think if it would in other senses, if it would come up in other ways that would be a problem. I know we had something like the Defiant Civilian, if you recall. Let's go to the Defiant Civilian, who says, you may attach this card to any unit or equipment in your faction's already active field. When an opponent would purchase the attached card, destroy this card instead. Similar to the High Guard, you're not able to target them specifically. See, they only have 2 defense, so that wouldn't be too much of a deterrent. The idea here is that when they're attached, you go to purchase the card that they're attached to, and in so doing, have to deal with them. They get destroyed instead, alright? Whether it's the High Guard or here the Defiant Civilian. So, it's making you have to pay the cost of the protected card, not pay the cost of the card that's doing the protecting. Now, in the case of the High Guard, it wouldn't be a big deal if you had to pay the cost of the protector, because the cost of the protector is 9. Alright? We're calling it a cost. It's the defense. Alright? But in effect, as regards to purchasing, it's a cost of 9 combat. Alright, so that wouldn't be a problem if you could target this, because it would be hard to get rid of. Presumably as hard or harder than, well, actually it would always be almost as hard as what you're protecting. Because again, the lowest captain defense is 9. That's Xerxes. So this would always be equal to, you know, or a little bit below what you would typically pay for the captain. So I mean, you wouldn't be able to get this and a captain on the same turn. Presumably, it would delay your ability to capture that captain at least a turn. So it would have its effect. But the Defiant Civilian at a defense of 2, you might be able to clip the Defiant Civilian and still get the card, which would kind of make it a failure. Their ability would fail. But, you know, a lot of times, as you know, in a deck building game, you're very close on what you know, the amount of resources you have to what you're trying to buy. And presumably you would use the Defiant Civilian only to protect something that was worth protecting, something that was, you know, of a high value, of a high cost. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, you would put the Defiant Civilian on an artifact or something like that if you could, because it says you may attach this card to a unit or equipment. So until you had something worth protecting, you'd probably just play it for its 1 combat until the opportunity arose to put this on something important, you know. And so if you had a cost of 7 on a card and then you added this 2 to it that you had to, you know, get past before you can get to the card, it may exceed the amount of resources you had that turn, but it's only 2. And we really don't want to bring it up much more than 2 because it's only a civilian. I mean, that's probably as far as you want to go on that. I mean, you could go 3, saying that this is kind of a strong, you know, feisty, you know, strong-willed unit who's really going to fight you to the death over this thing. So, I mean, I guess I would be okay with a 3 defense there, and then that would make it that much harder. I mean, if you're trying to get a card that's 7, 8, or 9, to add 3 to it would probably put you over the cap where you can't afford to do both, get her and the thing she's protecting. If you could, well then go ahead and get her and that. I mean, you have a lot of resources, so you could do a lot. I guess I don't have a problem with that. Alright, so we're discussing all of this in terms of, can you target an attachment? Obviously, the cards you play from your hand when you're playing a unit and then attaching a sword, let's say, those aren't going to be targeted because the player can't do things on your turn that would target it. So that's going to be a moot point. So even if attachments can be targeted, they're just not going to be able to target things at that point because they can't play cards on your turn other than in response to your strikes when they play an evade. So, you know, that would be okay. So really, we're only talking about the Defiant Civilian and the High Guard right now in terms of the cards that have been designed. And so maybe if we make them targetable, it wouldn't be the end of the world, especially if we bring this defense up to 3. So we could change that rule to where attachments can be targeted. Because this would only apply to attachments on cards in the active field or in the battlefield. So that's a pretty rare circumstance. So I think that's a way of working this out. I hope you've been following me with that. I know I'm kind of thinking out loud here about it, but that's kind of what I want to demonstrate with these videos, is the process of working these things out and presenting the problem to you as I am presented with the problem. And you can see what I'm coming up with, and maybe by your reaction to what I'm saying, focus your own thoughts. You know, because if you hear me saying something and you're like, no, man, that ain't the way to do it like this. That's making you better, you know. So I hope that, you know, in hearing my, you know, stream of consciousness here, it's kind of helping you to clarify your own thinking on conflicts like this and how to resolve them, you know. All right, so let's go back to the, who are we talking about? We were down here, we were down here, yeah, with Xanthan and how she works. Okay, so I'm going to work that out, and we'll come back with that at another point. Okay, so that's the idea. She's got bodyguards attached to her, and that makes it difficult to remove her from the battlefield. And then her activate ability, cancel an active assault against any location, remove the marching token. Alright, so this would be happening on your turn. So there would have to be an active assault in place already. A marching token has been placed on your location. If somebody played something like Concealed Approach, which allowed you to resolve an assault immediately, this wouldn't be able to interfere with that. But that's kind of the idea behind Concealed Approach, is it can't be interfered with. It can't be prepared for. So that's fine. That would, you know, that this wouldn't apply to that. This would only apply to assaults that happen while Xanthan is out, and that require a marching token to be placed. You're going to be able to remove that marching token, ending the assault before it ever resolves. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And she's able to do that through her influence and whatnot. Maybe she gets in and, you know, like bribes the guy who's leading the assault for you. Maybe she, you know, is able to influence people in the area to get in the way of the assault. Maybe to break a dam and then you can't cross the river, or you know, do something to otherwise hinder your ability to make this assault. Something gets in the way, you know, for some reason, and so she uses her influence to get things done. Alright, Xanthan is the 7th daughter of a noble house of high province, in honor believed to carry divine blessings. Alright, so that number 7, being the 7th daughter, is thought to carry divine blessings, and so she's very cherished and very respected, and you know, and her word is heeded over maybe some others because of her position in that regard. And then we have Dirksen, the minister of sorcery. We saw some of his quotes. Alright, a zealous and ambition minister. What did I say? A zealous and ambitious minister, Dirksen is viewed with contempt by some, but wary respect by all. Okay, you have to be careful with this guy. He can get in your head. He can do a lot of things to mix things up. So you got to be aware of him. Even if you don't like him, you got to deal with him, and you got to respect what he can do. Short, stout orc with jowls and black ringed eyes, carrying a wand with a horsish bird upon his wrist. Oh, okay, so I want to have this bird that kind of has the face of a horse, almost like a seahorse. If you can imagine a seahorse as a bird, which isn't too hard to do, you know, being that they're small and they're shaped a certain way. So that's kind of the kind of bird that he has on his wrist. And again, this idea of sorcery and animals kind of go a little bit hand in hand. And the arrival effect, each opposing player randomly discards a card from their hand. If that card is an elemental, they randomly discard another card. Okay, so yeah, so again, that idea is if the effect targets an elemental, which you would like to discard, you're going to get penalized for that. You're not going to get away with it. All right, but it is random. You're not going to be choosing an elemental, so they can't get around it. But if it just happens to be so, then you're going to lose another one too. So this could kind of be fun in that way, where you discarded a card and then, oh man, it was an elemental, now I got to discard another one. So this is the kind of response we want people to have to Dirksen. It's like, ah man, you know, I mean, he's a problem for a lot of people, even his own, you know. Turn ability, you may discard 3 cards to gain 1 influence. Okay, so you got to pay a hefty price, but you're going to be able to just grab 1 influence at will every single turn. So we have to have that price be a little steep. You know, it's going to influence your turn discarding 3 cards. I mean, you know, even if you have elementals in your hand, you know, you're going to be losing 3 of them, which could be 3 combat, 3 cunning, or some combination of the 2. All right, so you're paying a price, but you're going to get 1 influence, which then, presumably, you can immediately use to activate Dirksen's ability here, gain cunning equal to the number of units in your discard pile. So you just discarded 3 cards. So if you discard units to gain this influence, then you use that influence to activate this ability. You see how, you know, it may play out. Now, a way that this would play out is, let's say it was even elementals. Let's say you discarded 3 combat, let's say might cards, right? You discarded 3 might cards, which give you +1 combat each. And then you get the influence, spend the influence to gain cunning equal to the number of units in your discard pile. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the number of units. So it wouldn't matter if you did might cards. Alright, so let's say you did 3 basic units that are more combat focused because you're trying to get cunning. You see what I'm saying? So you might be giving up more combat than the cunning you're getting, but you're getting to trade in combat for cunning, you know, in this way. And in addition to that, you may have other units in your discard pile from previous turns. That's when you'd really want to do this, is when you have other units in your discard pile from previous turns, maybe even from this turn. Because if you purchase units, put them into your, let's say you have Broodfather Ozar, and you have a cost of 2, you can buy, you know, oh no, they're going to go directly into your hand if you have Ozar. Alright, so then that wouldn't work. But let's say, you know, you purchase units, they go into your discard pile, then this would increase this ability's effectiveness. You see what I'm saying? So now with Broodfather Ozar, it doesn't work because they come into your hand, not your discard pile. But if you have the sister twins, you're paying 3, so you may, you know, be able to, let's say you might have 4, 5, 6 units in your discard pile already, then you could add a couple this turn, you know, and then gain this combat cunning on all of them. Alright, but you have to see how that balances out, because that usually probably wouldn't pay. Because if you bought a unit for 3, it's only going to grant you 1 when it's in the discard pile. The difference being that you're going to get to choose whether it's com or cunning. So that's why you might be willing to make that poor exchange. I may be exchanging 2 combat for 1 cunning, or even 3 combat for 1 cunning, but I really want cunning right now. You see, so I'd rather have 1 cunning than 3 combat. You know, so again, we'll see how this plays out when we actually use it, but I think it would be useful in your ability to kind of, you know, exchange combat for cunning and so forth. Plus, if you just happen to have a lot of units in your discard pile, it'll work. Okay, so, alright, that's the final captain for the Xanthan Orcs. Okay, you see, we spoke a lot about the culture and the kind of faction group they are. I really tried to get across that idea of how they go about maintaining power, because it's going to be really important going forward in the lore. Alright, as this war progresses and what happens afterwards in the Clash of the Orc Lords and all these things, having this culture be well understood in terms of its perspective and how it does what it does is going to be key to getting the most out of that lore, of really understanding the world and what's going on. Alright, so that's why I spent a lot of time on it. That's why I tried to really infuse this faction group with these ideas in as many ways as I possibly could. We saw it on a lot of these units, talking about these different cultural and social elements, these power structure elements. And so that'll give us a clearer view of what's happening as we go forward. All right, but for now, a pretty interesting faction group with a lot of ability to control their own deck and to get the most out of the units that they do have, even if they're not the strongest units in the game. And I think they're going to be pretty strong, and they're going to appeal to a certain type of player. Okay, so next time we're going to be back for the final faction group, the Blood Orcs. And then after that, we'll be moving into our prototype play. So we're almost ready to roll here. So one more time through. Thanks for checking in. I'll see you next time.